A wild Phillies game last night, and the last couple of days, the Phillies have really changed. I guess they've taken a step in a direction. They decided to hold on to everybody. Kevin Cooney covers the Phillies over at Calkins Media, and we'll get his take on last night and, of course, what's moving ahead for this team. As Kevin, thanks for joining us first off. And then, of course, this is a team that kind of held pat at the deadline. Does this kind of indicate the next step for them and where they're going, or do you leave the deadline scratching your head a little bit?
Well, actually, Mike, I kind of don't. I know everybody made a big deal of why they held on to Jeremy Hellickson. We kind of figured this was going to be a quiet deadline. I thought especially when Peter Borges and Andres Blanco got hurt last week, I felt that both of them could have been low-level trades to contenders. Both are going to be free agents at the end of the year. I thought there would have been interest. Hellickson, there was interest, but I also think that the Phillies put a certain price on it. And the price was something comparable to whatever that sandwich pick is going to be between the first and the second round for a team that would sign him, with a after the Phillies offer a qualifying offer. Look, it's a risk. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind it's a risk that if Hellickson stinks the rest of the year, or if he gets hurt, then you end up walking away with nothing, and it's a bad move. But, if you're just going to get you don't make trades just to make trades. You don't do things as kind of a participation trophy at the trade deadline. You do something that you think is going to advance the narrative, and nothing that Jeremy Hellickson was going to bring back was going to be a game changer. So I did not have as big a problem with it as some others did.
Kevin, I want to get your take then on what's next because, as you wrote over at the Bucks County Courier-Times, you got Nick Williams, you got Jake Thompson, you got J.P. Crawford, but nobody's moved out. How do they find room to take a look at these guys if they're ready? As Matt Klintek indicated, when these guys are ready, we'll call them up. It doesn't matter who's in their way. So how do they play that?
Well, and look, I don't know what more Jake Thompson has to do to get called up. I think we're at a point right now where the more he actually sits at AAA, I think it almost becomes detrimental because at a certain point boredom sets in, and that's when the habits set in and all that. And I know you're not supposed to be bored when you're pushed for a big league spot, but if you've been as dominant as Jake Thompson has, there's a certain point where you need to up the challenge a little bit. So I think this team is looking right now at potentially a six-man rotation sometime in mid to late August here, maybe after this next road trip to the West Coast, because you're going to start running into some innings limits. Vince Velasquez is one. Aaron Nola actually could play his way down to the minor leagues, tonight if he doesn't pitch well. I think that at this point, Aaron Nola, has to kind of show some better results, some better consistency. His last 10 starts, Mike McGarry today in the AC Press wrote it. At a certain point, it's better to maybe get him fixed at AAA than to leave him up here and keep getting beat around. Do I think that's likely to happen? No, but I mean that's an option for Thompson as well. I mean, if Thompson's ready, you bring him up, you switch him out with Nola, and maybe you go that way. But there's enough innings limitations going on here that Thompson will be up at some point. Nick Williams, in my mind, Mike, Nick Williams should be up here sooner rather than later. He should be up here before September 1st for certain. Who is he taking at bat? Who would he be taking at bats away from? Jimmy Paredes and Cody Ashe. And to be bluntly honest, neither one of them figures in your long-term future. So I want to get Nick Williams a little bit of his feet on the ground going forward, before you get into spring training next year. I want to get him a little more exposed. J.P. Crawford's a little different story. Crawford's numbers aren't that great. He has a ton of errors. He's had 16 errors this season between Reading and Lehigh. And plus, there's also a matter of 40-man spots. You don't have to put him on the 40 this year to protect him for Rule 5. So, if you can protect somebody else with that, why not do it?
Kevin Cooney's with us. The Nola stuff's interesting. You think that's an option, that if he doesn't pitch well tonight, that they could say, look, we need you to go down and get some more work, just tinker with some stuff?
I think if maybe not tonight, but I think in the next couple outings, maybe the next two or three outings, if Nola struggles, if it was a decision, because Thompson obviously has forced the issue about coming up here, and again, I don't think that. Look, Roy Halladay got sent to the minor leagues. Cliff Lee got sent to the minor leagues. That's not a total indictment, but if you're working on mechanical things, if you're working on getting somebody's control back, perhaps sometimes the best way to do it is at AAA. He looked good in that first start after the All-Star break. He hasn't looked all that great since then. So I would say it has to be in the plans. It has to be in the discussion.
Hey, Kevin, does Aaron Nola have enough pitches in his repertoire? Obviously his curveball is outstanding, but I mean, that's his only out pitch. What else he needs to work on another pitch?
Well, and this is why, to be honest, Mike, when people were talking about him as ace material, and I think I was on with you, and I said you got to pump the brakes a little bit here because he's not overpowering. He doesn't have that four-seam fastball that's going to just blow by guys. He doesn't have necessarily a sinker or a changeup that locks guys' knees. He does have the curveball, but you're right. I mean, they're good. Could they be better? Could the secondary stuff be better? Yeah, I think so. And I think that's something that over time. Look, he's a smart kid. I mean, everybody who's talked about him has talked about his baseball knowledge, kind of his toughness and everything. But right now there's a mechanical flaw there that they just can't seem to get figured out.
Yeah, Kevin Cooney's with us here. The Phillies taking on the Giants. Wild game last night. Let me get your thoughts. You know how people overreact. Altaire's been on fire, and 5 RBIs. He's just been unconscious up here. And it's funny because the first thing you think of, man, what if they had this guy all year? I mean, maybe they're not a playoff team, but it would be nice to see what he could do over the full course of the year. What is your take on the small sample size you had of him last year and what possibly he could be? Is he, in your mind, Kevin, an everyday player?
I think the jury's still out on that, Mike. I mean, but the one thing about Aaron Altair that they loved was he had power that you could put in the middle of that lineup. That if you put him in through a whole season, maybe he got 25 home runs. Maybe he protected Maikel Franco a little more efficiently. Now they're getting some protection, obviously, from Josephs and Rupp. But, I mean, it gave them a little more of coming out of spring training. He was supposed to be the main power protection behind Franco and whatever you were going to get out of that first base spot between, with Ruff and Howard, back in Clearwater. Is he going to be an all-star? I don't know, but I think he can be just a solid everyday outfielder, a guy who's going to give you good defense, which honestly, I think is underrated with this team. That they need somebody who has a good arm and who can catch the baseball. You see Borges who is good, but defensively, but everybody else is kind of a little bit of an adventure, and it'll allow them to have a steady presence in the middle lineup. And so that's not a bad thing. If you can throw next year an outfield, a starting outfield of Altair in left, Herrera in center, and Williams in right, you've got a pretty solid core there, and then you can start working on your other stuff, which will probably be your middle infielders.
Yeah, one thing we talked about late in the week last week, Kevin, was how much intrigue there will be at spring training. I know this season's not over and you're still evaluating, but, man, it should be a lot of fun seeing a lot of these young guys battle for 25 spots.
Yeah, and it's actually, I mean, there's a couple things I'm looking at. Look, August and September with this team is going to be trial and error, okay? And we all kind of know that. That this is what it's going to be. It's going to be more, young kids coming up. The remaining veterans here who, like a Cesar Hernandez or a Freddie Galvis, kind of fighting for their starting spots. But it's going to be interesting to see how spring training plays out. And more importantly, Mike, what moves does Matt Klentak make in this offseason? you know, the one thing I kind of applauded Klentak on was if you just make a deal the other day just to make a deal, then I think it does send a wrong message to GMs that maybe this guy acts out of rash and haste as opposed to an actual plan. I know that sounds a little Sam Hinkie-ish, but you know what I'm saying. You know, so I get the sense Klentak is open to listening to all things. I thought the most fascinating thing that came out of the trade deadline weekend was the rumors about Vince Velasquez.
Yes.
And the fact that the Phillies were actually listening to offers for him tells me that they're going to be very open-minded on all pieces they have, and that they will, unlike maybe they were under Ruben Amaro and David Montgomery, there are no untouchables here. And I think that opens up the possibility, if they feel like they have enough pitching depth, that they could turn one of those pitchers into a big bat in the middle of the lineup. Then you're maybe cooking for something for 17.
Yeah, you know, and that's what I took from them holding on to Hellickson and saying, you know what, if we bring him back next year, that allows us to at least listen for Velasquez or Nola or one of these other younger guys that can get us a bigger return than just dishing Hellickson off now.
Yeah, and you know, look, the market for Velasquez and the younger guys is going to be better in the off season. Okay, and what I mean by that is you're not going to necessarily have the innings limit worries that you would with Velasquez. Now, look, I mean, the Rangers wanted him, and that's a good sign that they're fishing in your system to try to get a guy. Okay, but that being said, you know, there was also a practicality. If you're Texas, we're not going to pay this price because we probably don't have this guy for the playoffs because of innings limitations. So if you get the innings limitations out of the way, by the time you hit Washington for the winter meetings in December, you know, maybe the market's opened up where teams are more willing to part with a top prospect. And you also have a bigger field of people who may be interested at that point than just teams who are, quote-unquote, in contention at this point.
Kevin Cooney covers the Phillies, Calkins Media, Bucks County Courier-Times, and really good, interesting stuff on the Phillies, as he has a nice piece on Nick Williams and Thompson. Also, the umpire ejecting a fan from the game last night. He was the pool reporter for that as well. That's a great assignment there, by the way. Thanks, Kevin.
No problem.